Hey guys, Chemical Gamer here, bringing you another moveset guide, this time on Okidogi, the last of the loyal trio. So, I was really excited for this Pokemon when I saw the trailers. This is definitely the one I was the most anticipated for. I really like tanky, bulky Pokemon. And when we finally got to see the stats on this thing, I was a little bit disappointed. Again, we're at that base stat total of 555, like all the other legendary Poison Trio Pokemon, which is relatively underwhelming for a legendary, especially when it's just kind of all over the place. But the biggest reason I was disappointed with Okidogi in particular is seeing that the base stat total for its hit points was only 88. I saw this was a Pokemon that looked like a big chunky boy, and I was expecting to have a much higher base stat total of the hit points. And for those of you guys that don't know, like having more base stat totals in your hit points is actually better a lot of times than having it spread between the defenses. Because like that defense looks really good, but sometimes Pokemon have deceptively high defenses, but such a low hit point stat that it really doesn't feel that great. So it's definitely better to have higher hit points. 88 in the hit point's not bad, but I was expecting this Pokemon to be at least 100 or higher. And some Pokemon's, like some analogies I thought, is I was expecting the high attack stat with the hit point. If we take a look at some of these Pokemon, Iron Hands here, huge hit point stat, so you're getting a ton of effective bulk, and 140 attack, which is massive. Actually, all three of these Pokemon have 140 attack. Ursaluna, again, 130 hit points, and then 140 attack. And Conkeldurr, 140 attack with 105 hit points. All with relatively decent defense stats, but this is also going to help in their special defense side so much more. Iron Hands is just so much bulkier of a Pokemon because it has such a high hit point stat. Ursaluna is kind of the same deal, and then that special defense stat being at 80 is pretty good. Conkeldurr is definitely comparable, only with 105 hit points, and the defenses with being a lower base stat total. A lot of that's going to the attack and the hit points. But again, Conkeldurr and Ursaluna also going to take advantage of their Guts ability, which is just going to give them a ton of natural attack if we're running like Flame Orb on them. And Okidogi just doesn't have that advantage. So kind of strange. But then if we look further into its stats, we see that we have a base stat total of 80 in the speed, which is definitely a lot faster than these three Pokemon. So it's definitely a lot more speed on the Okidogi than I expected. All these Pokemon are right around 50, 45. So surprising amount of speed. But it puts you in a really, really weird speed tier where you're not fast enough to be like a sweeper Pokemon, but you're not slow enough that you're getting a lot of that effective EVs, that the base stat total going into your effective bulk. So you're at kind of a weird, awkward point. It's definitely usable. It's just a little bit disappointed when I saw it. Being at base 80 speed puts you in a really weird speed tier where you match use speed type Dragonite and a few other Pokemon, and then you're just getting outsped by a few others too. The thing about investing your speed is if you're investing in speed just to match in speed type Pokemon like Dragonite, which I think a lot of times Okidogi will want to do to find yourself in that speed tier. Now, if you're going up against Pokemon that are faster than you, all those EVs you're investing into the speed are now just getting wasted because you either are faster than the Pokemon or you're not faster. As with some of these other examples here, if you know you're just going to be slower or accepting that or only putting a little bit of investment into speed, now you can just go all in knowing that you're going to be a bulky Pokemon, that you're going to take a hit and then dish it out even harder. As with Okidogi, you're in this kind of awkward spot where against some Pokemon you're going to act like a tank. Against other Pokemon, you're going to try to find that outspeed. And it's definitely good against like slower setup tanks. We'll take a look at its moves too really quick because going off of that, you do get access to the Taunt. It looks like I forgot to mention this, but you definitely do get access to Taunt, which is huge. Being a more bulky Pokemon, just being able to come in right away, shut down a slower Pokemon. If you look at all the kind of counters that you have, these are all slower Pokemon that don't want to get a Taunt on them. Clodsire, Toxapex, Corviknight, Amoonguss. So if you can throw down that Taunt on them, you're going to be in a really good advantage. Looking at its Tera types, it's kind of weird. And really for Tera types, you're either looking for a little bit more damage, going with the Stab, same with type attack bonus, with Poison or Fighting Tera type, or you're just trying to get rid of some of those weaknesses while rounding out your coverage. I really like the Dark Tera type on Okidogi, because if we look at its weaknesses here, again, we only have 3 weaknesses, but we're 4 times weak to Psychic. And so getting rid of all those weaknesses and then also now granting an immunity to the thing that we're most weak to can be really good. And we have Knockoff for some really good coverage. We're going to see Knockoff in a lot of the movesets that we're going to show you guys here in a minute. So that can be really good. That can be a really good option. I really like Dark a lot. It's supposed to be Ghost, not Coast. But Ghost is really good because if we're just using fighting type move, like looking for the best coverage with 2 fighting type attacks, we're looking for fighting type move, and then also a Ghost type move. And that's going to really round out our coverage and allow us to hit most things like at neutral effectiveness. And then Ice sometimes is going to have viability. Let's talk about the abilities actually right now when we're talking about the Ice type. So Toxic Chain, we already know what that does with Pheasantipede and Monkey Dory. It gives you a 30% chance to poison the target with any attacking move. And I actually don't use it on any of the sets I'm about to show you guys. I think Guard Dog is the best ability by far, which makes you immune to Intimidate, and it also means you can't be switched out. In a 3v3 setting, I think that's best against Pokemon that are going to try to like set up hazards and then force switches. And we're seeing that a lot right now in the 3v3 battle spot with Garchomp and then also Tane Lu, where they're going to want to set up rocks and either use Dragon Tail or War. And so if we can kind of just get rid of that ground weakness and get a good matchup against them, and then also boost like an Ice Punch against these Pokemon, Ice type, Terra type can also be a pretty decent option as well. Items, I definitely like Assault Vest the most on this Pokemon. I think that's the one that makes the most sense. With that natural bulk that you have, with that high defense stat, just kind of running out your defenses and being able to go all in with your bulk or invest in your speed, while still giving you a little bit more effective bulkiness. Feels really, really good on this Pokemon. So I definitely am a big fan of Assault Vest and Okidogi. Actually being in a higher speed tier makes you a better user of Assault Vest than some of these other options in certain situations, these analogies. I also like choice items on this Pokemon. I think Choice Scarf is actually a pretty good option because with that 128 base attack stat, you do find some one-hit KOs, especially if you're hitting a super effective move. So if you can go Choice Scarf, catch somebody on an outspeed, and just find a super effective hit with your pretty good coverage, that can be a really good option. Choice Band is just going to allow you to one-hit KO some Pokemon with that high attack stat at neutral range, just with your decent coverage. Punching Glove is a Pokemon I don't really run on a lot of Pokemon, but because a lot of your punching moves, like you have a lot of punching moves, I think it actually makes good use of it. You have the Drain Punch, you have Ice, like the Elemental Punches, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, Electric Punch. So the Punching Glove is definitely a good option. Citrus Berry is just going to allow you to stay a little bit healthier and just try to go 1-for-1 plus. Might allow you to set up a bulk up and then go from there. So that can be a really good option. And then Air Balloon is going to be nice, just not having to worry about those ground types. That matchup right away is going to be good. Especially with that Guard Dog ability. If you're going up against a Tane Lu or Garchomp right away, and you have the Air Balloon so they can't just hit you with an Earthquake, that's going to be really nice. Especially if they waste a turn trying to set up hazards. That really is going to put the advantage in your court. So definitely good item to run on it as well. Life Orb can just be good just because you have some decent coverage options. You can still take a hit, and that might just give you enough damage to find a one-hit KO where you otherwise wouldn't. That's definitely an item that I would only suggest running if you've done type calculations, if you're finding yourself just not having enough damage against certain Pokemon, against certain matchups. But it's definitely viable on Okidogi. And then Salakberry, we'll talk about Salakberry in a minute. The Pokemon it's strong against, when I was looking at the ranked ladder to see the highest usage Pokemon, it's actually surprising how many really top tier Pokemon there are that Okidogi does well against, which is really good. Ogerpon is the next Pokemon we're going to do a moveset guide on. This Pokemon is kind of nuts, but Okidogi, I think, finds itself in a pretty good position against most of the Ogerpon sets. And being more physically defensive, too, is really good against the Ogerpon, since Ogerpon's a physical attacker. So that can actually be a really good option. I think that makes Okidogi a much, much better Pokemon. It's a pretty good anti-meta Pokemon. It's also very good against Chain-Pow. Chain-Pow doesn't do much against this Pokemon because it's, at best, it's going to hit you with Icicle Crash and try to flinch you. And you might be able to catch it off guard, like with a Choice Scarf or some other options we'll talk about in a minute. Does very well against Heatran. You might get trapped and take some damage, but you can't get poisoned. I don't even think Heatran gets toxic now. They added it back in the game either. But even if it traps you with Magma Storm, it really does. That's not a matchup that your opponent wants to get. And even if they go Tera to try to avoid some of those matchups, you're still going to have really good options. If they go Tera Ghost, you're going to hit them with the knockoff. If they go Tera Fly and you have other options, you can hit them with your stab, poison type attacks. So there's just a lot of really good options there. Does very well against Mimikyu and Kingambit too, and there's just a lot of other Pokemon that has decent matchups. Just because you have a pretty good typing overall. And then again, your biggest counters are just going to be a lot of these setup tank Pokemon. Garganacl is mentioned here just because a lot of times they'll go Tera Ghost, and it's just going to set fire in defenses and shut you down. You also can't status it with its ability, so it's really annoying matchup. Dondozo a lot of times is going to run Rest. We'll do a moveset guide on a lot of these Pokemon too soon, but I want to get through the DLC Pokemon first. But I think Dondozo just has a really good matchup against this Pokemon just because it's so physically defensive and it struggles. You're not going to really find a KO against Dondozo. Nihilape is just going to, again, bait your attacks. It's going to bulk up against you. It can shut you down. And then eventually Rage Fist is just going to be able to take you out. Clodsire, Toxapex, Corviknight, and Moongus. It's pretty straightforward how these Pokemon shut this guy down. So let's go ahead and hop into Pokemon Showdown and talk about some movesets that you can use with Okidogi. All right. So this, again, Assault Vest is my favorite item to run on Okidogi. Getting that effective bulk with your special defense and you're already naturally high defense feels really, really good. And this is something I forgot to mention earlier, but with those other analogy Pokemon like Ursaluna, Iron Hands, Conkeldurr, being higher hit points stat means you're getting less effective restoration from your Drain Punch, so actually having a lower hit point stat and having higher defense is better in that regard. It means you're going to just be recovering a little bit more. And Drain Punch and Assault Vest has such good synergy because you're taking less damage and you're able to kind of just maintain your health a little bit. So you may be able to find that one hit, that 1-for-1 plus, maybe even knock out 2 Pokemon just with that natural bulk. You have really good move coverage. You can go Gunk Shot or Poison Jab here. I think in this situation I would go Gunk Shot just because it's so much damage with your base attack stat that against weaker Pokemon you're going to find one-hit KOs where you otherwise wouldn't. And even though that lower accuracy, I'm kind of the philosophy I'd rather take, in some situations, I'd rather take an 80% chance to find a one-hit KO than a 100% chance to only get the 2-hit KO. So it's really a matter of choice. But I think having that option with some lower base power moves is good. You're going to still get consistent damage with the Drain Punch, but you're not going to find a lot of one-hit KOs unless it was like a super effective hit. Knockoff is really going to round out your coverage, which is really nice. And then also being able to knock off opposing Pokemon's items, especially healing items. While you're a Assault Vest Pokemon, that's really, really good, getting those additional effects. And then Ice Punch is just going to round out your coverage a lot. It's going to be really good for you as well. Now, this is a more like bulky investment Assault Vest set where you're going more hit points rather than speed. I just have a little bit of speed creep in there. It's really up to you how much you want to invest in speed. This is really just so that you're outspeeding a lot of tankier Pokemon, but you're still able to take a lot more hits with that bulk in your hit points. I have another example here where we're actually running Assault Vest again, but we're going a lot more offensive to try to like speed match some of these base 80 Pokemon. So that can be really good for you as well. And I like this more probably if I was going up against Pokemon like Dragonite, where you're going to define the speed tie, and then hopefully you can outspeed, get an Ice Punch off, or do some other good things with that. That can be a really good option. But just goes to show you can run it more bulky or run it with some more speed. This next set here is going to be Choice Scarf. So I like Choice Scarf on Okidogi. I think you have enough damage that if you run an Adamant or running Choice Scarf, you're going to find yourself in some really good matchups. You have overall really good coverage. Again, I put high horsepower instead of knockoff on this situation. You can kind of play around with the type coverage. This is not just on Pokemon database. We'll go show you, first of all, that first moveset, that first type coverage set here. So if we do Poison, Fighting, we want Ice and Dark. So we're hitting everything here. And then we also have a lot of super effective hits. Okay, we're hitting super effective on a lot of Pokemon in the metagame right now. It's fairly similar if we were to swap out like Ground versus Dark. About the same, right? But if we go like Ice and Ground too, we're going to find the most amount of super effective hits, I think. About the same, right? So, but I like having knockoff with Okidogi. I think it makes the most sense. But sometimes you might want to go for the Ground if you have that poison matchup. It's really a matter of what your team needs. You can kind of play around with it. And again, on both of these, I'm going Tera Dark just to kind of give you that triple stab with knockoff. But going back to the choice scarf set here, I kind of like high horsepower a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit more base damage, and it's finding those super effective hits with the ground types is going to feel really nice. You do have to be careful with Pokemon going Tera Flying to avoid that weakness, because Tera Flying is just a very common defensive typing that you'll run into, but overall pretty good. You can also run this Choice Band, but if you run it Choice Band, I would definitely run it Jolly instead of Adamant, just to give yourself a little bit more effective speed and be able to speed tie against Pokemon like Dragonite. So this next set here, taking advantage of the Punching Glove, I did all punching moves. You can kind of play around with it again based on what your team needs and your type coverage needs. In this situation, I went Tera Ice, just because I think this does pretty good, especially with that Guard Dog ability against Pokemon like Tainlu, against Garchomp as that lead. If you're more worried about Tainlu, I might run the highest horsepower as opposed to like maybe Fire Punch on this Pokemon. Just because a lot of times Tainlu will go Tera Poison, and being able to have that super effective hit if they go Tera Poison is going to be really good for you. But I think it does take good advantage. For those of you that don't know, Punching Glove just gives you 1.1 times boost to all punching moves. So in this case, it would just get a little bit of a boost to all these moves. It might make the difference between having like a 2-hit KO versus a 3-hit KO. And then again, just relying on your natural bulk, that's going to be really good. Or it might make the difference too if you find the super effective hit, making it a 1-hit KO. I haven't really crunched a lot of the damage calculations, but I definitely see this being a pretty good item to run on Okidogi. And then Citrus Berry, like we talked about, is this going to allow you to get that bulk up and then also do some cool things. I actually kind of like running Low Sweep on Okidogi just because with that speed tier, if we're going max speed, in this case I have it Adamant just to get the most effective amount out of your attack stat, because your attack stat's your highest stat. So we're going plus 10% with the Adamant nature and your attack stat. And we're actually going for some more bulk and a special defense since we can boost up with bulk up. And then you might just find a situation where you can bulk up once, Low Sweep, then Drain Punch, get a little bit more health back, come into a new Pokemon, Low Sweep, Tera Blast, whatever you need to do. And I have Tera Ghost here just because it gets rid of your weaknesses and it gives you the most offensive coverage. So if we hop back into type coverage calculator again here, if we go Fighting and Ghost, I think that's the best coverage you're going to get for two moves. So you're not going to do anything against Hisui and Zoroark, but that's pretty much the only Pokemon you're going to run into. And then you pay normal effectiveness, or again, find those super effective hits on a lot of other Pokemon. So overall, some really good coverage, but that does mean you have to go Tera if you're going to run this option. But overall, pretty good option on this Pokemon. Then the last thing I want to talk about is Salad Berry. So you do have Endure Reversal, which is pretty strong. I think it makes pretty good advantage of it. And being at base 80 speed, it means that if you boost with the Salad Berry, you can go either Jolly or Adamant here. It's really up to you. But with base 80 speed, if you endure, so that once you don't get knocked out, you're going to proc that Salad Berry, get +1 speed. Hopefully you'll had 1 or 2 bulk ups before that, and then you can just rely on your natural attack. Hopefully find some outspeeds, and then just do some reversal sweeping. So this set's kind of fun. Very niche. Priority will be able to come in and just take you out at that 1 hit point range, which isn't great, but definitely catching people off guard. I don't think a lot of people are going to be expecting that. And then again, we're going Tera Ghost just to kind of round out that coverage. So there's definitely some other things you could run with Okidogi. Like I said, Life Orb's good. You have access to Taunt if you really find yourself running into a lot of those setup Pokemon, those big walls. So you have a lot of options, but just go out and have fun with Okidogi. It is a very good Pokemon. I really hope you enjoyed this moveset guide, and this is Gemicool Gamer out.